Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
Persons under 18 will not be admitted.
I'm choosing to ignore the cuts and bumps and bruises. I'm cruising through these haters, leave them looking stupid. They foolish if they think they'll ever hear my conclusion. I'm through with all these part-timers and their excuses. I'm bruising eagles left and right every time I do this. I'm shooting for the top, no I'll never settle where you did. The future's in my hands, my grip will never loosen. My crew is ready to obtain the absolution, removing any doubt that we was ever fooling.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to another kick-ass episode of Still Toking with, you know who I am, I think. I would hope you did by now. If not, well, oh well. But as always, the flashy one himself, Mr. Jeffrey Mark.
Hello, hello, hello. I am resplendent in gold and black today. I'm just feeling golden and happy to be with. And I'm always happy to be with the other guy who lives near you up in New England, one of my favorite people, and his Jeff Holman.
Hey. Is it Wednesday? Yes, it is Wednesday. Oh, cool. We're live again, right? This is live, right?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I am so this subject that we're going to discuss tonight. When I was doing my research, and so I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. Fuck, I didn't know that. Really? You're kidding me, right? This guy is a wealth of knowledge, and I am so looking forward to him explaining some of the things that I didn't understand. Because, I'm only somewhat college educated, and there's some words that I was like, what the fuck does that mean? But I didn't have time to look anything up.
It means don't play with matches.
Well, it's not just matches.
I know.
There's a lot of variables here, and I'm really interested in getting into this discussion with Mr. Steve Pyne.
Thank you.
Hi guys.
How are you?
I'm fine. Doing pretty well.
Thank you for joining us.
Always
Yes,
happy to talk about fire.
Right?
I'm a pyromantic, not a pyromaniac. Important distinction. So
Pyromantic. Okay.
pyromantic. So
I like that.
All right.
I like that.
for our viewers that are watching now and the listeners later, can you explain the difference between a pyromantic and a pyromaniac so they don't get confused?
yeah, pyromantic is simply somebody who's fascinated by fire in a helpful and engaging way, and accepts fire as a kind of presence and companion. Pyromaniac is someone who cannot control urges with fire and is dangerous to himself and to others. So, there's good fire and bad fire. There are people attracted to fire. There are good guys attracted to fire, and there are bad people attracted to fire.
Oh, well, there's nothing better than sitting around a nice campfire, when you're out hanging with your buddies and stuff. I mean, I love to do that.
Right.
Well, if you didn't, we've been doing that all our existence as a species. And if that wasn't attractive or you found it distasteful or threatening, you would have been out of the gene pool a long, long time ago. We're drawn to fire. If I just went out and set a bonfire someplace, people would gather.
They would.
Yeah, true.
100%.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire did not start with Mel Torme.
So I want to just get kind of right into you, first of all. A few days after you graduated, you joined the North Rim Long Shots. Is that correct?
Yes. Graduated from high school. It was an accidental initiation. I signed on to be a laborer at Grand Canyon National Park and was ready to work in the South Rim, signing my papers. And a guy from the North Rim fire crew called in and said, I can't come. And they wanted to fill the position. There I was. They asked me, you want to go to the North Rim? You know, fire crew? Well, I'd never been to the North Rim. I had no idea what a fire crew did. I was 18. What did I know? I said, sure. So we flew over, and in many ways, it was kind of a magical entry. There was a big storm over the canyon. We're in this little 182 Cessna flying around, dodging that. And when we land in this meadow in the middle of this, 9,000-foot elevated forest, and then the hail comes and the storm and fog and clouds are rolling through. I mean, wow, what had I done? I'd entered this strange world. And it was completely different from what I had grown up in a Phoenix suburb and done and understood. And so I was absolutely enthralled. And I kept returning. I returned all the way through college and graduate school and then beyond, 15 summers in all, 12 as crew boss. And then later with the Park Service, I wrote fire plans for a couple of national parks.
Right. So
I learned fire on the ground. It was never taught back then. Certainly where I went to it.
Right.
And there's a big difference between, the long shots or hot shots or the various names that you guys are given out there in the wilderness to your urbans, which are, your firefighters. And the reason I bring that up is Jeff and I both have relatives that are in fire, urban fire now. Our parents were firefighters, but you literally cut lines. You carried saws. I mean, you backburned.
Yeah.
And for our viewers, can you give them a little bit of a difference between the wildfire aspect and the urban fire aspect? Because I know that's an important fact for you.
Sure. And just to clarify on our crew name, we came back from a fire, our yellow Nomex, and we were just filled with soot and ash and all the rest of it and grinning. And a tourist stopped by and said, hey, are you guys hot shots? And one of the crew guys said, no, we're long shots. So, which was appropriate. And so we just took the name. I mean, it's all so grim and everything is sort of existential and tragedy and the rest of it. For us, it was a great way to live. I mean, we relished it, the camaraderie, the hard work, the challenge, the rest of it. So we could make fun of ourselves too and still do the job. Okay, that's long shots. There are different fire cultures around. and the two big ones are urban and wildland, and they're really quite distinct. There are a few places that try to merge them, and it's very awkward. CAL FIRE is one, which is basically an urban fire service out in the woods. And some volunteer fire departments in rural areas, you have to do both, but mostly you do one or the other. In an urban setting, you are dealing with a built environment, and your fires, for the most part, are not going to flow through the city. They are going to be concentrated in buildings. And your first goal, you try to get water on the fire, isolate the fire, and so forth. But your first responsibility is life safety, and taking care of making sure people get safely evacuated and so forth, and then tend to the fire. And the fire tends to stay. It moves through a building maybe, but not move. We're seeing a change now. We're seeing a merger of different kinds of fires, but basically urban fire has been, for the last century, has been that. Wildland fire, you're dealing with a completely unbuilt, uncontained environment. So you don't control the winds, you don't control the terrain, you don't control the fuel. You may have some control over the ignition, but basically you're having to deal with a free burning situation. And they're very different. And life safety is not the primary goal. We're in wildlands, that is to say, places where people are not residing. Now, we do have complicated places where they begin to intermix, but basically our life safety concern is making sure we don't get into a ridiculous situation where somebody's going to get hurt. The trade-offs are really not worth it. And so it's very different. And, urban fire, the message always is learn not to burn. Well, in a wildland situation, it's all about getting fire on the ground. We use fire to control wildfire. We use it with burnout operations, sometimes at large scales. So, and the whole mentality, particularly in recent decades, has drawn further apart. So, every fire put out in a city is a problem solved. But most fires put out in wildlands are problems put off, because that place is designed to burn. It needs it. It's not just ecological wokeism and being careful with the environment. That firescape changes in ways that make future fires more difficult to control and probably more severe. So you're not solving the problem. The case is we can have fires of choice or fires of chance, as it's been put. So we can put our fires in, or we can just leave it to chance and have the worst fires come upon us, which are outside our control. But they're very different. They're very different mentalities. They're different stories. I mean, most wildland firefighters, again, until very recently, are seasonal. You do it as a tour. You do it for maybe a couple of seasons, maybe 3 seasons, or really hardcore, maybe 4. Then you get a few real weirdos who try to make a semi-career out of it, lasting as long as they can, because they just like it. But mostly, in urban fire, you get in a career ladder. And there are volunteer fire departments, which are different. They have their own sort of social arrangements and ways of learning and advancing. But the wildland fire season is sort of a time in one's life. You pass through it. You're young. You do this for a few seasons. You have the experience, and then it's a kind of rite of passage, and then you go on to your life. Now it's becoming, the fires are meaner, they're larger, everything's getting more difficult and dangerous. And so the character is changing. But fundamentally, I think they're different kind of life stories. You don't see novelists writing, crossing it. You see very few occasions where they try to. CAL FIRE is one that does, and that's one of the reasons CAL FIRE is so costly, and when it most matters, maybe ineffective, because you ultimately control urban fires by the design of the urban environment. Your building codes, your zoning codes, your infrastructure for fire, your professional firefighting systems. The wildlands, you don't control those. So trying to take that urban model and put it into a wildland setting you're setting yourself up for failure. So you can knock out all these sort of nuisance fires, the small fires, some of them may be threatening here and there, and so forth. But the really big ones, the ones that do all the damage, the ones you need to control, you can't, because that environment is not in your control. And one of the things that's happened in recent decades is that I think the country, and not just the US, the developed world, decided urban fires don't happen anymore. And so we don't need to do all the sort of hygiene to keep fire out. And so we're starting to see cities burn again. So as far as the fire is concerned, an LA suburb built a monoculture of houses is no different than a pine plantation of even-aged trees, and it's just going to blow through it. So, I don't know where. Look, I'm a recovering academic, so just tell me enough.
Right. I want to throw something out here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but on the urban aspect of it, aren't there a lot more hidden hazards that you need to be aware of? I mean, you've got gas lines, you've got propane tanks, people have grills, all sorts of things could go wrong, collapses and stuff like that. You don't run into that in the wildfires.
No, we don't have that, but almost all of those hazards are human-made.
Right.
And so, again, you don't have it in the wildland because people aren't doing things in the same way in the wildland. What's really making the urban scene deadly recently is the introduction of toxic metals, toxic chemicals, synthetic furniture, all these other things that now fill our houses. So a house made with cloth and wood and cotton and all the rest of this stuff, a room might take 10 or 12 minutes to really get cooking from a single ignition. Now it can do it in 60 seconds. Right. It's just like throwing gas. Well, it's the same source. It's the same petroleum source. So it behaves that way. And so in an urban setting, very few people would go into a building without an air pack. Because you can't breathe that toxic air. Wildlands, we don't have air packs. I mean, can you imagine a hotshot crew out there day after day having to change air packs every 15 or 20 minutes while they're cutting line? They never get any line. I mean, the whole thing. They're just really different cultures, different kinds of fires, and they need to be kept apart.
Right. And to bring up a point, like Jeff just said, the urban hazards. In wildfires, you have extreme hazards as well, because like you said, you can't control it. And I love history. I love watching, real life documentaries on things like that. And a wildfire can literally be in front of you and jump behind you, or travel underground along a root system and pop up somewhere. So in wildfires, you still have some extreme hazards that you have to watch out for.
You certainly do. And if you look at, most fatalities on wildland fires now are medical. A lot of them are volunteer fire departments, and others where people come, they have heart attacks or something. Other cases, mostly we can identify where you have crews burned over. They're mostly on slopes. They're in areas of light fuels, which means grass, shrubs, something that can respond quickly to a change in wind, say, and changes in wind. So they're places where things may not look very dangerous. I mean, if you've got a giant wall of flame, 60, 80, 100 feet of flame, you're not going to be anywhere around that. And so you don't think you're at risk when you're in some of these other environments, but suddenly a fire escalates, a gust of wind gets it moving, it gets into a chute, it gets into a ravine, up a slope. Suddenly that's a big chimney. You don't want to have anybody around there. That's very dangerous. Thunderstorms, the winds associated with thunderstorms, the microbursts, very dangerous. All of these kinds of things we've mostly identified, but they're not the stuff that we can really control. And a lot of it, hazard trees, working in environment, trees that burned if they were dead to begin with. Now they're at risk of falling, so you don't want to go into a big snag field. You've got pits, maybe a a stump, a root system has burned out, and all you see is ash, and you're walking along, and then suddenly you're down to your knee or your waist in a pit of embers. So there are plenty of hazards, but I don't want to overemphasize the danger of it. Most lives are lost from vehicle accidents, aircraft accidents, medical. We have some spectacular cases where crews are burned over, and what a horror.
Right.
But that's different. Urban fire. I know urban fire. I've talked to some guys, and they don't like the idea of having fire all around them. They want to have it in the structures. They want to have it in the area. And the wildland guys, the last thing they want to do is to go into a burning building. You've got no maneuver space.
Steve,
So they're really different. I mean, we all share we're all fire guys, but fire folk. And there are places now where the two are starting to merge in unhelpful ways. And just to go back to your other comment about one of the ways wildland fires spread very prominently is by embers. So, and this is where you have houses adjacent to countryside or wildland areas. The fire that comes in is not coming in as a tsunami of flame. You have sort of this Hollywood vision. You have these immense flames, and you just see it roaring over like this giant wave going over this city and obliterating it. That's not what happens. The fire breaks down because you don't have the continuity of fuels. What comes in is a blizzard of sparks. This ember storm. And as one researcher put it, the embers will find a way. So it's like this invasion of fire crickets or fire locusts. And they come in and they're going to find all the points of vulnerability. We know where they are, and they're going to find that, and then that's what's going to ignite stuff, and then it's going to go house to house, and a lot of the house-to-house transmission is going to be by ember. And if you build a fire line, you've got strong winds. Well, I have personally been on fires where spot fires were started 1.5 miles away. So you're not going to be able to rally a group of fire engines and make a stand with hose. You're not going to have any water source, for one thing, to stop this thing. That's nonsense. You're going to back off, if you can't do it directly, you're going to go indirect, as the saying goes, and you're going to find defensible areas that are safe for firefighters, stuff that you can hold, and then you will burn it out from there and hold it. So it's very different. Where I worked, the North Rim is a karst environment. It's a limestone cap, and we had no surface water. I mean, we had no streams, no springs. We had a few sinkholes that occasionally filled. That's it. We all our water we carried in on our backs. So we the idea of fighting fire with water for us really alien. I mean, we did it with dirt and 5-gallon bags that you carry in, and you're very economical squirting that stuff around because carrying that up and down, that can get old, and the fun of fire wears off very quickly. It's just dirty. Anyway, I don't know if this is really what interests you, but they're really different cultures, and it's important not to confuse them. Yeah.
Right.
Steve, may I ask a slightly controversial question?
Sure.
You mentioned a little earlier that wildland fires seem to be getting worse.
Yeah.
In your opinion, you are an educated, 40 books on this topic. You're the guy. Do you believe that global warming is making fires worse? Is that something that's to you real and should be studied and looked at? Or is that something you don't think is something that's important? With fire, I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I think absolutely. And global warming is simply putting more energy into the system, as I see it. So what underpins fire, the climatic requirement, is the rhythm of wetting and drying. So it's got to be wet enough to grow stuff and then dry enough to burn it. So if it's always wet, you're in a temperate climate, and every month you have more or less the same kind of precip, you're not going to have a basis for natural fire. So if you're in a rainforest, it's not dry, it's not going to burn. You're in a desert, it's not going to burn because it's not wet enough to grow stuff. So in Phoenix, we have wet winters, we have desert fires. Dry winters, we have fire in the mountains. So it's that pattern, and global warming is affecting that. We're seeing these rhythms amplifying and I think becoming more frequent. But that's not all of it. What fire burns is pretty fundamental. So let's call it the fuels, the landscape, however you want to address it. And that has also changed. And that has changed dramatically. And so, to my mind, as I look back on it, it's basically underwriting or underpinning both of those processes is our conversion to what I think of as basically a fossil fuel society. Because we have changed the geography of how we live on the land, where we get our power, how it's transmitted, how we do agriculture. We don't do agriculture in patches now, burning fallow and all these other things, which were also fuel breaks and help to protect communities from surrounding fires. All of that has changed. And all of this is a result of petrochemicals. It's a result of simply the stuff we get from fossil biomass. So I rely on fossil biomass, but like all of us in the developed world, but doing that is getting all the different aspects of fire, not just the climate, but also the fuel aspect is also being shaped by this. So we're left with a really big paradox, a couple of paradoxes. One, the amount of area burned on the planet is actually decreasing. And most of the decrease is happening in savanna areas, a lot of it in Africa, a lot of it from traditional fire-based agriculture. It's now converting the Green Revolution. Well, the Green Revolution replaced fallow. You don't burn it. You've got petrochemicals. You've got power machinery to do all this other stuff. And that changes our agriculture and countryside. We also live differently in these excerpts and so forth. So that's one. But the fires that we do have tend to be getting larger and more uncontrollable. And the worst of these fires are mega fires, and particularly the ones that are now penetrating into and through cities, are restricted to the developed world. Well, this should strike us as really odd. Why is it that the wealthiest societies, the ones that have the most science, the most robust technology, all the things that we're going to rally to stop fires, are the ones that are being pounded?
Well, that would lead to my next question. I live in Palm Springs on the West Coast, not far from you, actually. And, you know, my publicist and a friend of this show, Harlan Bowl, his house burned to the ground, as did the Ella Fitzgerald's Foundation's house burned to the ground. The recent LA fires touched me personally. And we were in a big fire alert out here in the desert that they were afraid it was going to travel from Los Angeles out here. How could something like the LA fire, where it's in Pacific Palisades, and then way over here, it's in Altadena, and then it's in South LA, and then it moves to other, how does that happen all at once? Could you help those of us who don't get how that could happen, how that happens?
Well, the conditions will, particularly the climatic weather conditions, will be regional. I mean, they're not going to be specific to one neighborhood. So if you have regional conditions, any ignition under those conditions is going to lead to a fire. And the character of the fire will depend on what's there to burn. So it's very common. It's rare, in a sense, to have a big fire by itself. There are going to be lots of other fires, most of which may not get large, so you don't hear about them. But the simultaneous character of fire over a large area would be fairly common. The conditions are right for it, and then it just depends on ignition. And in Southern California, almost all the ignition is going to be human, and so and a lot of it's accidental. You have a car crash. Somebody's dragging a chain as a trailer, and the chain is on the road dragging and throwing sparks. That's what happened in Redding, California, led to the fire tornado, for heaven's sakes. All kinds of stuff can happen. People get careless with fire. Unexpected things happen. We're a fire creature. The Earth is a fire planet. It's the only fire planet we know of. Fire has been on the planet as long as plants have been on land. So we have charcoal dating back 420 million years ago. Fire and living landscapes have co-evolved. So there's nothing strange about fire. In fact, the chemistry of fire is a biochemistry. I mean, when it burns in our cells, we call it respiration. It's metabolizing. The same chemistry happens on a sort of wide world outside, we call it fire. Life created the oxygen. Life created the fuels. Life now in the form of humans provides most of the ignition. So it's a fire planet, but we are a uniquely fire creature.
Okay.
We have a species monopoly over it. This is what we do that no other creature does.
Now, I wanted to ask you, a couple of years ago, I was up in Alaska, up in the Denali area. And up there's this whole part of this woodland forest or wild land that they call it, that they do not put out the fires. They want it to be natural. If the fire was started by lightning, they let it burn, figuring that the environment, rain, whatever, will naturally put it out. And apparently it's been like that for a long time, where I forget what the terms they use. It's kind of like a reconstitution of the forest land. It grows, it burns, it regrows. And it also fertilizes the soil because ash does that. I mean, I remember as a kid watching the field across the street from my house burn. And when it grew back, I've never seen grass so brilliantly green. So there is a positive side to some of that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, well, fire, as I say, is natural, and many systems landscapes have grown up with fire and the expectation of fire in a certain pattern. Okay, just as they may have an expectation of rain, but the rain comes in a certain pattern. So it's adapted to rain, adapted to water, this forest. But if you change the pattern, say instead of having consistent precip every month, it rains for 6 months and is dry for 6 months. Well, that's no longer adapted to that rainfall. It's the same with fire. So it's not just fire or no fire, it's the patterning of fire. And I know people talk about, well, they just let fire go. I don't know of any agencies that do that. They are managing these fires. They are not trying to put it out in the way that we would think of an urban fire needing to be put out as soon as possible. They may pull back, and there are benefits to get that may be cheaper, safer, and actually ecologically helpful, and help reduce the prospect for an uncontrollable fire later, to let this fire do some burning. And I've seen a couple of them operate around where I live here in the Tono National Forest, and they're very patient. These are not emergency backfires. The fire's coming, we got to stop it. They may take a couple of weeks to complete the project. Be patient, work with the fire. It's more like loose herding the fire. So they're pushing and pulling it. They're engaged with it. If they're doing it right, they're engaged with the fire. They're just not letting it go. Alaska, you have a lot of room in many places to let it go. But even there, they have pre-plans. They want to keep it within certain bounds. For one thing, because then if they need to move in and try to contain it, again, these regional conditions are going to be that there may have a lot of wildfires that they need to take more aggressive action on elsewhere, and they're not going to have the resources to do that if they futz around with things too much. So it's really much more interesting than just saying we've got to put it out as fast as possible. There are trade-offs, and it's kind of, I mean, thinking about it, doing the planning, managing it, it's a much more challenging and interesting project.
When I was growing up, and all of us, we're all about the same age. When we were growing up, Smokey Bear and Don't Play with Matches and all that, there seemed to have been some public education and awareness of we can't just put things on fire willy-nilly. Yeah. You don't see that nearly as much anymore in media talking about fire. So I actually have two questions, but you can answer both or either. Have there been since we were kids. Are people fighting fires differently today, or is it the same basic fireman stuff from when we grew up? And what can humans, because we are aware that it's changing and getting worse, what can humans be doing to make the situation better?
Okay, good questions. I'll see if I can keep both in my mind long enough to get through them coherently. Yeah, we are fighting fire. We are fighting fire differently. The modern American wildland fire story really begins with the Great Fires of 1910. Traumatized a young Forest Service, and for the next 50 years, the agency was committed to putting out fires, all fires. And in 1935, they had the resources to really take it on, and they had something called the 10 a.m. policy. Every fire, regardless of where it was, would be put out by 10 o'clock the next morning. And if you failed, then you planned for 10 o'clock the next day. So when we were growing up and Smokey Bear was in his prime, that was the policy. And so the country spent 50, 60 years really trying to do that. And then by then we realized the consequences, or what's known as the fire paradox, that the more you try to control fire in this way, the more uncontrollable it becomes. That you took out the good fires as well as the bad fires. It's as though you just sort of saturated antibiotics and you got rid of all the bad bacteria, but you killed off all the good bacteria too. And now all you've got is the drug-resistant bacteria. So that's sort of where we're getting with fire on this. So in the 60s and 70s, first with the Park Service, then with the Forest Service, there was a major move to reconsider fire. Policies were changed. Agencies were reorganized. And the goal became more pluralistic, to prevent bad fires, but promote good fires. And this meant restoring fire where possible. And originally this was, well, we'll only do it with natural fire because fire's natural. We're committed to keeping this natural to the extent we can. But since it's expanded, fire is fire at some point as far as the vegetation's concerned. And it makes more sense to work with what you've got. So we spent 50 years, 60 years trying to take all fire out. We've spent the last 50, 60 years trying to put good fire back in. It turns out it's a lot easier to take it out than to put it back. It's a lot easier to sort of smash in, put a lot of power in, knock it out. People are no longer rural. They're going in cities, so they're not setting fires. The demography has changed. The landscape has changed, firefighting. But since then, we've really been trying to get it back in. And it's sort of like reintroducing a lost species. The fire will be sensitive to its habitat, and the habitat has changed now. So we can't get the same fires because it has changed because of fire's removal. And now we may need to do some stuff to be able to get fire back in. And since the 70s, 80s, there have been a lot of efforts to do this, but it's also being overtaken. We've been in a long drought, certainly in the West, for the last really 30 years. And global warming is changing conditions, and it's making everything's becoming much more difficult. So they're still working on it. So what can we do? We can do a lot. I define the fire problem. The fire committee, you guys have been around or done fire in some ways. You know the fire triangle. The fire committee loves the fire triangle. Okay, here's my fire triangle for the future. We've got too much bad fire, too little good fire, and too much combustion. Bad fire, fires that kill people, burn towns, incinerate sequoia groves, municipal watershed. Okay, clear, do everything we can to try to stop those fires. Promote good fires is a lot tougher because you get into values. Well, what do we want this land to be? What are we willing to do with it? But we know we need to get good fire back in, if only to help contain bad fire. But there are lots of other ecological goods and services we get from it. It's part of our ecological infrastructure that helps us function. And the combustion, well, this is fossil fuels, guys. I mean, there's no way around it. We can mitigate, we can harden our communities, we can keep our cities from burning. It's ridiculous that cities are burning. It's ridiculous that power lines start fires. All of these have pretty clear technical solutions. We can do that. We can control some of the vegetation. We can begin getting some good fire back in to help nudge things along so when really awful conditions are present, you don't immolate the forest. The forest will have enough resilience against fire that it can ride through it. But ultimately, unless you slow down climate, global warming, and the changes that's right, your mitigation measures will be overwhelmed. When will that happen? I don't know. I'm not sure anybody knows. We're in terra incognita. But I do think we are underestimating the scale of what's going on. I mean, humanity as a fire creature, we have been altering the climate. We have been altering the planet since the last ice age. And at a scale I don't think most people appreciate. But still, we were operating within certain boundaries. Again, fire has co-evolved with living landscapes, and humans have. So we could manipulate it. It's flexible, malleable within up to a point. When we start going with fossil fuels, all those bets are off. There's no fire season. You can burn day and night, winter, summer, weather, dry, it doesn't matter. We got so much stuff to burn. We keep finding more stuff to burn all the time. The problem is what to do with the effluent, with all the waste. I mean, we've taken this stuff out of deep time. We've released it in the present. It's kind of geology's Jurassic Park. And then we're surprised that it doesn't belong in this world. The world can't accommodate it. It's outside all of those old ecological boundaries and sinks and ways of accommodating. So we really have to deal with that. But when we do, or when our grandkids or great-grandkids finally get to a more stable climate, we're going to be doing a lot more burning than we are now. We have used that fossil fuel power to suppress landscape fire, just as we did in cities and in agriculture. And now we're extending it out to the wildlands. The problem is it needs to be there, and we're building up a huge deficit. So we actually are going to be doing more burning, but we will be doing it under controlled conditions. And yeah, we're going to have smoke, hopefully not in these subcontinental smoke palls that drive everybody into safe rooms. It'll be a seasonal nuisance like pollen. It's just, that's just, look, you want to live in a forest, you've got to deal with pollen. You want to live in a natural setting, you're going to have some smoke, but we have a lot. There's a lot we can do to control. I mean, this is our role in the great chain of being. We've forgotten it. It's only in the last century or so that we've completely become unhinged. I mean, we have had large fires in the past, 19th century, early 20th century, worse than what we're seeing now. But that was all driven by logging slash and land clearing. Even at the end of the Little Ice Age, you don't need 3 years of drought. You can do it with 3 months in the right time if you've got a mountain, if the landscape is just lathered with this logging debris. That is really going to blow up. So that was what was driving it. Now it's a mixture of how we live on the landscape because we've changed our society and the power behind it, and how our use primarily of fossil fuels is altering the climate. Well, this is theoretically in our control, all of those. So I think my priority would be we need to work on all of them. But the first step is to stop the cities burning and this stuff. This is absurd. And we've had this term wildland urban fire. And it got defined by the wildland fire community, which saw the problem as urban development, suburban sprawl, exurbs, as compromising their ability to manage fire on the landscape. So it got defined as a wildland fire problem complicated by houses. You could pick up the other end of the stick, which to my mind makes a whole lot more sense, and say these are urban fires complicated by funny landscaping. And we're confused because we see this odd landscaping, these sort of giant vacant lots out there, and that's the problem. No, the problem is it's an urban fire. You need to treat it as you need to, whether you want to think you're living in an urban environment or not, you are, and you need to treat it as an urban fire, which we understand how to do. So that, and we can work on the wildland stuff if we choose, but it gets polarized and complicated and all kinds of competing interests and all kinds of nonsense about this is how to fix this and this is how to fix that have nothing to do with fire. You've got to imagine, how does fire see this? not how does it fit into our political prism or our worldview. How is fire seeing it? Because if we don't talk in a language fire understands, it's going to ignore us. It operates on instinct. It's just going to do what it does. It doesn't care. It really, really doesn't care. And then the climate change, fossil fuel stuff. Okay, it's controversial. It's a mess. I've got grandkids. I'm expecting great grandkids before the year is out, and I'm not the least happy that with the world they're going to inherit and the trajectory of that, which we seem unable to reverse.
Some of your research and work, since most things that are living have a yin and a yang, also on ice, which is the complete opposite side of the coin, which it fascinates me that you study both. Can we talk about ice for a little while? Just because,
yeah, sure.
What do we need to know about ice? Those of us who are not informed.
Well, yeah, how did this happen? As I said, I spent 15 seasons flipping. I was a 2-cycle engine. I started in the North Rim, and then I'd go to college, and there I had nothing to do with fire, zero. And then I'd come back to the Rim. I had absolutely nothing to do with all the academic stuff. We were completely isolated. We had no phones, no internet, no radio, no television. And it was wonderful. We were never bored. And so the ice came out of my academic career. I wound up studying, I was interested in the American West, the history of exploration, geology, history of science. And then I learned about this fellowship that National Science Foundation, which oversees all American involvement in Antarctica, and the National Endowment for the Humanities cooked up. They wanted to get some people who are not scientists talking about what they're doing in Antarctica. And so they ran this for 5 years, and it required that you spend 1 to 3 months on the ice. And I took them for 3 months. I was unemployed. I was just working my summers. And so I was happy to be gone for 3 months. The family didn't have to feed me. And I spent Christmas at the South Pole. I spent New Year's at a place called Dome C in the East Antarctic Plateau, 14,500 feet of ice. And it was pretty much the end of the world. You have reduced the world to one mineral. You would have to go 3 miles straight down to find a rock. One mineral, and that mineral consisting of one molecule in its simplest, most inert form. And this sort of immense reductionism. So in thinking about it, and I wanted to know how, this was my encounter with the ice, how did Western Civ encounter it? So how did explorers, what did it do to exploration? How did this change? What happened with art? What happened with science? What happened with politics? So you began with an iceberg on the outside, and then you finally end up at this Dome C, which is a source region, because ice flows out, no ice flows in. You just get what's called diamond dust. You get a couple of inches of this sort of house dust, ice crystals coming down, and that's it. And that sort of became the driver. And I have to say, it's probably my best single book. I was young, and it was the timing was right, and I was completely immersed in that. It actually made the New York Times 10 best books for the year.
So let's tell our friends out there the name of that book.
The ice. The ice is the slang term for Antarctica. That's when you go into the ice, how long are you staying on the ice? What are you doing on the ice? And I realized that, this is ice. That's what this is about. Quit pretending it's something else. It's ice. And the further you get into it, it buries mountains. It does everything. It's all ice. And partly because of my interest in geology, I also became interested in ice ages. And then this has finally fed back into my fire stuff indirectly, because I now think the magnitude, the scale of what we are doing, humanity is doing with fire directly and indirectly, we are creating the fire equivalent of an ice age. That is how I would understand it. We have been in an interglacial. We have broken the series of ice ages, and we are now shifting. We are creating a new epoch, which is being informed by fire, or what I call a pyrocene. And so my sense, we're way, way beyond needing to live with fire, learning to live with fire. We have to live with the fire age. So I think here's my literary imagination at work. I think that we're seeing a kind of slow motion Ragnarok. We are seeing a world burning and reforming event. It's just being prolonged over decades, probably over a couple of centuries. We are remaking the planet with all of our various fires.
Wow.
Is the problem in the Arctic of glaciers melting also happening in Antarctica?
Yes. Yes,
And
it is.
what is your very wise opinion on that and what we have to do about that?
Well, I mean, there's concern about sea level rising, and we're talking about millimeters and small amounts, and the amount of ice stored in Antarctica. I think the phrasing was equivalent to 60 years flow of the Amazon River. So if you took the total flow, annual flow of the Amazon, you did it for 60 years and you froze it. That's how much ice is there, 10 times the amount of what's in Greenland. So if you start melting that at scale in any form, the oceans are going to rise, as they have in the past through the ice ages. Now, Antarctica is more, there are two parts of Antarctica, west and east. East Antarctica is basically a huge block of ice on a continent, roughly the size of Australia. West Antarctica is a chain of islands. So if you think of East Antarctica as Australia, think of West Antarctica as New Indonesia, and these chain of volcanic islands, and they're all welded by ice. But the West Antarctica, which is ice is probably equivalent to Greenland, is more unstable. And the fear is that will. So how do you melt it at the bottom of the world like that? Well, you're not doing it by radiant heat. What you're basically doing is that you're changing the amount coming in, and you're exporting it in icebergs and flows. You're exporting it to where it will be warmer. So the ice is going to where the heat is and melting. But glacial dynamics, I read a lot about it, but I haven't kept up on it since then. What I came away from Antarctica was a vision of an ice world, and then I realized that we are creating a fire equivalent.
Wow.
And you can,
I mean, go ahead.
Map all these different changes, mass extinction, changes in sea level, biogeographic shifts, changes in climate. Instead of outwash plains, we've got debris flows and smoke balls instead of heat domes. Instead of proglacial lakes, we've got heat domes. I mean, you can find fire heat informed equivalents for all of these sort of glacial features that we identify, and I see them happening. So, to my mind, that is the abstract. Well, this is what academics do. We abstract. So, thank you for tolerating me. But this is what we try to bring to the table in a helpful way, and this is mine. As the saying goes, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So, I'm proposing a metaphor as a model, and I think there's a value to it, and that's what I tried to bring to the table.
Now, do you believe that the planet has its own natural evolution that it goes through over millennial? I mean, it's been around for a long time. You look back at the dinosaurs and it was tropical. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I mean, man wasn't even here. The planet was still going through its changes. So it has its own, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's a living thing, in my opinion, and I think that it's constantly evolving and constantly changing.
Yep, and over the last 420 million years, fire has changed accordingly.
Right.
I mean, we've got mosses and ferns. It burns one way. If you introduce animals, they change the vegetation, so fire changes, and it's come and gone. We've had fire ages in the past. It's not unprecedented for the Earth to have a fire age, and we've had ice ages in the past. What is unique here is that humans have reached a scale that we are creating it. The Earth can accommodate that. It has stuff to burn. It has oxygen. It has ignition sources. It's got all the ingredients. And right now it's got somebody who's manipulating all of them in ways that are replacing the Earth's natural cadence over the last 2.5 million years, which is to have long ice ages and short interglacials. we're lengthening the interglacial into a fire age. That's
I mean, you know, yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I
you know,
was just
okay. Yeah, somebody told me something once that really kind of stuck with me. It was a long time ago. They said that mankind is nothing more than a parasite on a living being.
Well, that's true for everything living. I mean, everything living requires the rest of life to be able to function. So, yeah, I can certainly sympathize with that. And part of the problem, okay, we're doing all this stuff. Okay, we destroy ourselves. The earth will go on. Fire would go on without us. But the problem is us, our kids, our grandkids, and so on.
Right.
We've created a world that is set to accommodate a range of things. And we are very rapidly moving beyond that range of things. So how are we going to remake our world so that we survive? It's not about just, okay, what are the equivalent of dinosaurs disappearing now or the rest, extinction's normal. But we're talking about a world that may no longer be habitable for us. And our infrastructure is all out of sync with it. And so on. So even if you're just going to be completely anthropocentric about this is not in our interest to continue. And it is in our control to begin to mitigate and ultimately halt or even reverse. And I can see us, we've demonstrated we can disrupt the climate. Now we have to show we can manage it. And right now, having seen a world of ice, we can accommodate a fire age easier than we can an ice age. An ice age, there's nothing but ice. A fire requires the living world to function in. Ice doesn't. It's just mechanical. It's just matter. So we may need the threat of a future ice age is probably a larger threat than a fire age for us. But we may be able to forestall or mitigate the coming ice age by our ability to manipulate fire and combustion. So I can imagine a time in the future where the future will condemn us not for burning all of our coal now and creating these problems, but for burning it before they had a chance to use it. They may need it to moderate the planetary climate. Okay, that's real fantasy.
So
that's real
interesting,
hypothetical stuff.
We are getting close to the end.
but yeah, I have
Go ahead.
a bunch of comments and things that have come in this evening, and a gentleman just asked a question. So Virgil's joining us from Manchester, England, but he said a friend of his said that the third law of thermodynamics poses that all temperature will equalize eventually. What do you think about that?
Well, I've spent a lifetime wrapping my head around the first and second law of thermodynamics and still struggling. The third law, I'm not ready. I'm not ready at this point. I'm not willing to go the universe. The Earth is world enough for me. I have enough problems.
I just wanted to throw that in there because I mean,
why not?
Sitting here listening to you for the past almost hour, I'm looking at your show notes and stuff. And for the folks listening and watching, if you're interested in anything that Steve's talking about tonight, check the show notes up above or down below. There's direct links to his website where you can purchase his books, all kinds of other podcasts and things that he has done. But you can absolutely tell 100% that this gentleman was a professor and a teacher.
Absolutely.
100%. Because most college professors and college teachers, they talk and they know how to talk and continue talking about everything that you're going to ask them so that they can get the hell out of the classroom before you raise your hand. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm a recovering academic. I understand.
Right. But one thing I wanted to say is that I found very interesting is you have traveled to all 7 continents. You've traveled everywhere. I mean, you've been to Antarctica, Siberia, the shores of the 7 seas, all 7 continents. Is this all chasing fire? Well, we know Antarctica wasn't, but or chasing the academic knowledge behind what you're doing?
Well, I don't enjoy travel just for the sake of moving and traveling. I go to learn something. I have a purpose. I was also in the history of exploration has been one of my continuing subject. I've written about the Voyager mission. I've written a book at Great Ages of Discovery, looking at Western civilization over the last 600 years and so forth. So this sort of made sense. Some of this I could visit stuff, but mostly it was to look for fire. I got one of these MacArthur Fellowships back in '88, and I could spend it for what I want. I took the money and ran. I went to all these places that could tell me something about fire that I could never have gotten to if I had to fund it through normal grant channels and fellowships and the rest of it. So I felt a real obligation to use that money for a purpose larger than my entertainment. And while I was certainly engaged with it, I said I want to do something that couldn't be done otherwise. And so that's what enabled me. I actually got to the Soviet Union. There was a thaw at the moment. And I got there, spent a month crossing the Soviet Union. Very interesting time. I got back about 5 days before the coup attempt that ended the USSR. And then I went back a couple of years later and filled in some other spots. Since then, I'm not allowed back. They won't give me a visa. But that was an interesting fire. So all of that was fire. Fire helped to justify it. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I mean, you've, for the watchers and the listeners later, you've written 40 books, regarding fire and some of ice, so I was just wondering if those travels were the reason for, chasing the fire, basically.
Yeah, I was smoke chasing. I mean, that was what we were called when I started. They were seasonal smoke chasers. So you're hired to get a smoke report, you chase it down, put it out, and I'm still smoke chasing in that way, in that sense, and happy for it. But I also have been interested in. I mean, Antarctica, the ice. Wrote a book, How the Canyon Became Grand. Right. I wrote a book on the Voyager mission, which looked at exploration and then other stuff. So I've had these other things. And so in some ways, just as I had these two lives when I was at the RIM and university, I still continued. So I have a set of books that are sort of based out of my university life, and then another set of books that grow out of my fire life. And the fire life has been a lot bigger one.
Before we completely run out of time here, when we were in the green room before the show, I made the hopefully human and humorous contact that Ben and Jeff and I are all writers and authors, but not as prolific as you. Have you ever had an unpublished thought, was the joke? Is there more to write about? Or is your writing about this subject like complete in your mind? Or is there still more that you want to explore on paper?
Well, there's a lot I would like to do. The problem is it's always what resource, writing is like politics, the art of the possible. Why take subjects? There are lots of interesting subjects. I'm too old to be able to pursue them in the way I had before. And there are difficulties. I have no money, but nobody's written a fire history of Africa. Nobody's done it for South America. Nobody's done it for Asia. I've got parts of Asia. I've got essays. I've got the Soviet, Russia. Part of that, there are huge amounts of the world that have not been read, even by a kind of first order reconnaissance of the sort I do. Now, I'm not a scientist. I use a lot of the scientific information to write narratives and construct sort of institutional histories, idea histories, and all this other sorts of stuff. But we don't even have a recon of these other places. So if I had another 20 years and another MacArthur, I would do that. There's plenty to do. And okay, I've just rewritten my fire history of Europe, condensed it. But I'm looking at that. That includes Russia. It includes the Atlantic Islands, includes all kinds of other stuff. I mean, there are 1,000 topics somebody could write a book on there just because I wrote a general book. Wow, that should open up people. Let's do it for Norway. Let's look at what's Serbia's fire history. Has anybody looked at that? What does that mean? just all over the place. And a pyromantic, I'm prepared to sort of see it in that way. Most people are not. So that's why why aren't there 20 people doing what I'm doing? Well, I had this quirky biography and got interested in it and developed a way of thinking about it, a voice thinking about fire, and others haven't. But there's an immense amount to be done. And I've got, I don't want to stop writing, but I have to write, I have to pick topics that I can do with the resources, energy, and time I've got.
Nice.
Well said. So, folks, what he meant by that is that he's looking for an understudy that might want to take on all those other places. See, you have to read between the lines with some of these professors.
So yeah,
ahead, Jeff.
I got a last question for you. How do you think the world's volcanic activity fits into all of this?
Another great question. Well, volcanoes have been important for outgassing and creating a lot of the Earth's atmosphere. And so they're primarily important, I think, for their contribution to an atmosphere that, at this point, allows for fire. But it's really the living world that created the oxygen that fire needs and the fuels that fire burns. Volcanoes are important. Actually, volcanoes are very interesting in the history of Western Civ, by the way. They're a great index, a great marker. You can track it all out through volcanoes, but that's for another time. So I'm not sure how to go where to go with that question other than that.
It wasn't meant to be a trick question.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It was.
If you expected me to erupt in brilliance, it's not going to happen.
Well, do you think do you believe that volcanic eruptions are a good thing for the planet? The more the better, or less?
Well, they're not a good thing for people who live right next to them, could be buried under them, although volcanic soils are very rich and useful for people to grow stuff in. They're simply a part of the Earth. I mean, if you value the Earth, then volcanoes are a part of it. And that's part of what makes the Earth the Earth. It's still an active planet in ways that Venus and Mars are not. So Mars may have inactive volcanoes, but that's because the planet appears to be fundamentally dead in several senses. The Earth is not. And so I'm fascinated by, and I'm not, by the way, despite my interest in exploration, I'm not interested in colonizing Mars. The Earth is my home and will always be. And I'm much more interested in saving the Earth, saving humanity by saving Earth.
I agree.
Bravo.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I asked that question was because I was, looking into a little bit of what they call the super volcanoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yellowstone, for example. And, if something like that were to go, it's an extinction level kind of an event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I question as to how much power mankind actually has on the planet when you're dealing with something like that is the Earth. That's all.
No, that's a great point. Yeah. We are beyond arrogant. We're hubristic with our sense of power.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not bringing us a better world.
Agreed.
So,
everybody out there.
The power that matters is our ability to control ourselves.
Right.
And your homework out there is to look up the word hubristic and find out how to spell it, because it's a great word.
Ben, pull that comment up again that somebody said to look into.
Permian extinction event.
Yeah. Permian. Yeah, the Permian. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be highlighted and saved in the show note comments, anyways, for the live show. So you can go back and look that up.
He also thinks you look like Anthony Hopkins, Jeff. So, having met Mr. Hopkins, Jeff is better looking.
I don't know. Most people tell me Ray Liotta.
I can mute both their mics. So We are over time. So, Jeffrey Marks, do you have any last questions for this guest? I know Jeff already asked his, so.
I want to ask you a publishing question. Are your books all through one publisher, or did you have to, with each different topic, find someone different to publish your books?
Yeah, good question. And I've tried to stay consistently with the publisher as long as I can, but publishers change, my topics change, and my potential audience changes. And so I have changed. I started in academic presses, was able to go trade for a while, and then the recession, I think, pretty much ended that. I was always marginal for trade, and now I'm back with academic presses, which in some ways I always think I really take great effort to make what I'm writing about fire lively, informed, information rich, but interesting, but lively and accessible. And I get comments sometimes. I meet readers at a talk or something, came up and said, I enjoyed your book, but boy, it was really hard sledding on this. And I just deflate. I thought I'd done it well, maybe compared to most of my academic colleagues. I'm on this side of the spectrum, but yeah, the reality is.
And I was going to say, if your books read the way you speak, they've got to be fascinating.
Right. Well, they're about fire and ice and a few other topics, but majority of about fire and ice. So if that's intriguing to you, buy his books. It's that simple.
Buy his books. Buy his books.
Right. So I am going to wrap this. So, Steve, real quick.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on social media, websites, things like that? I know I have in the show notes, but.
Sure. Well, I have an author website, www.stephenpyne.com, and that's probably the best entry to what I do. I am on Blue Sky, and that's really, I have to say I'm an analog guy, somewhat adrift in a digital world, and
so
really not plugged in.
Yeah, throw up some smoke signals. He will find you.
Okay. Yeah. Smoke Chaser Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Jeffrey Mark.
Well, listen, it's been fun talking to you guys. No, you had good questions, and it was a fun group.
Well, it's a very, very interesting subject.
Yes.
Believe me, fun for us as well.
So just hang tight, Steve, real quick, and I'll close out the show, and we'll let you get off to your rest of the day, I guess. Mr. Jeffrey Marks.
Well, those of you who are watching and listening, and in 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be able to see Jeffrey Mark Plays Ella on this very network, produced by Ben, starring me. And hopefully you will greatly, greatly, greatly enjoy my playing Ella's music for you on a theme and telling you all the insider stories. I can be found on Facebook, Jeffrey Mark, just the way it's spelled there below. I can be found on Instagram, Jeffrey Mark Showbiz, and LinkedIn, also Jeffrey Mark. And turn on your toothbrush, you'll find me someplace. It is always an honor to do this show. We get great, great guests, and my co-hosts are awesome. So thank you, all three of you gentlemen. You made my day great.
Excellent.
Jeff?
StillToking.com, you know the routine. StillToking.com, Talking with the Dead on Facebook. That's where you'll find everything you need to know.
Wow, that was like the shortest ever outro for you. I want to take a quick second and say thank you to Steve for taking time out of his busy schedule to chat about his amazing career. We're going to put it that way, his amazing career, because it's all over the place. But definitely check the show notes up above or down below. You'll find all the information you need to know about him. You know, as Jeff said, stilltoking.com for us. But to all our veterans and first responders, we want to thank you for doing what you do so people like us can come up here and do what we do. Stay safe. We'll see you next week. We're out of here.
Have a happy.